Hi, Jenny. It's good to see you this morning. We're going to talk about the Libra new moon, right?
That's right. Good to see you too, Laurie.
All right. So before any of you listen to us at all, please like us, subscribe to us, follow us, do all those things and make some comments. Let us know you're out there so that other people will find us as well. And with that being said, you can find Jenny at hiddenpathastrology.com. You can find me at astrolore.org and on social media platforms.
That's right.
Okay. So what we're talking about is the new moon, the Libra new moon, which is just a few days after Libra season starts, which we did a video about. Go back and listen to that one if you haven't already. There'll be some things we'll probably repeat, but there's always new information.
Yeah. Well, so this new moon is happening on September 25th.
Yes.
It's at 5:54 p.m. Eastern time. So adjust that for your time zone to figure out when that exactly is. But I think the first thing we should do is talk about the phases, right? Like, what are we all talking about with that new moon?
Yeah. Why does the new moon matter? Well, the new moon happens at the point when the sun and the moon are aligned from our perspective. So if we go out at night, it's a very, very dark night. That's when the seed is planted of a new cycle. After that seed is planted, the moon grows a little bit each night. And, there are actually 8 full cycles. We don't need to go into all of them unless you think that's important, Jenny.
No, but 8 phases. Yep.
Yes.
We just like to focus on the fundamental ones.
Right.
So yeah, let's just keep it like that.
Okay, so we start with the new moon. We plant a seed at the new moon. At the first quarter moon, that happens a week after the new moon. And that's when you look up and you see half of the moon. So that's the first quarter. The idea is you plant a seed at the new moon. At the first quarter, you take some action to really move that forward, the seed that you planted. And then the full moon comes a week after that. And that's the full illumination. That's when you see what has become of what you have planted. If you think of it in terms of the plant cycle, that would be the full illumination, the blossom, however you want to think about that. A week after the full moon, we come to the last quarter moon, which is a breaking down of the cycle. The moon is getting smaller each night on that second half after the full moon. And so that's a time of kind of releasing and letting go. And then a week after that, you come to the next new moon. That's the 1 month cycle, 28-day cycle. And yet at the same time, the new moon, you are planting a seed that is also attached to the larger cycle, which is a full year cycle. Talk about that one a little bit, Jenny.
Yeah, well, the full cycle just brings you all the way around. At the 6-month point, you'll see the full moon. So for the shorter cycle, we're looking at October 9th, there'll be a full moon in Aries. The longer cycle is April 6th. There'll be a full moon in Libra. So that just gives you a longer time frame to think about the same sorts of topics, because that's really what happens in our lives, right? You have this like microcosm of week by week or day by day, and you work with small things on that level, and then you can look at the year and think of all the different things that transpire in that year. And part of what we're doing here is just making suggestions around what the symbols are in the zodiac, of how to kind of best harness the energy that's available, and depending where it's impacting you. So we do kind of a general overview, and some of you may be getting these contacts at very important points in your own chart. So maybe feeling things more extremely than others. We've actually been talking about that before making this video. So for both of us. So think about that too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so that kind of covers the issue of the phases themselves. So then right now, this is a Libra new moon. So let's talk about Libra a little bit. Libra is the cardinal air sign. So, and this Libra new moon happens right in the very early degrees of Libra too. So it's a very powerful point. But Libra itself, as the cardinal air sign, it's a very powerful sign. People sometimes misunderstand that because Libra, people think about Libra, they think about the scales, the balance. trying to make things look good, diplomacy, all of these issues that sound kind of gentle. And
Yeah.
yet it's a cardinal sign. It's a very strong sign, and it is an intellectual sign, because it's an air sign, and people misunderstand that too. They think, oh, it's about relationships, so it should be about emotion. No, it's about what it takes on an intellectual level to create diplomacy and relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes people think it's kind of weak or dependent. And I think some of that is because Libra is so concerned with kind of this cooperative, harmonious ideal that it just doesn't really, it sometimes loses itself. It forgets where it itself is, or the person with the big Libra emphasis, it kind of forgets, so busy thinking about other people. And sometimes it takes that so far that it's actually completely out of balance in how it's thinking about other people. So there's a really tricky balance between, between Libra kind of reckoning with, oh, wait a minute, what do I, the individual, need? In the middle of that. So you see people, a lot of Libra, I can certainly think of them, they kind of see all sides of the issue, and maybe they are actually good at mediating and they're good at facilitating conversation, but you might ask them their own opinion and they might be like, me, what? Like, oh, and you might be sort of surprised that they've lost touch a little bit with their own opinion. So that's something that's interesting with Libra.
Yeah.
But I know how you like to say that sometimes Libra is that represents that person who comes into the room and and there's no arguments going on, so they're like, wait a minute, so they start an argument just for the sake of like having debate and bringing people into the conversation and having this like discourse, which kind of speaks to some of the cardinality of it.
Yeah, that ability to come into a room and encourage discourse, like you said, and get things balanced and in a good place. But then if they walk in the room and everything's already going well, they oftentimes will throw a little bomb in there just to give themselves a job to do. And I say them, and it's hard when the way we speak, it sounds like we're talking about people with a Libra sun are this way, and that's not the way to think about it. It's the energy of Libra itself, and you can see those kind of tendencies sometimes in people with a Libra sun, sometimes in people with a Libra moon or Libra rising, or just a bunch of different planets in Libra. But it's not, it's not as simple as, if you have a Libra sun, this is how you are.
Yeah. And right now, with the moon being in Libra too, part of what we want to get across is just that you have to kind of grapple with your own inner balance. You've got to, with that moon designation, you've got to kind of understand what's going on for yourself, so that you can actually, if you are going to have any hope of manifesting that outside of yourself, you've got to have an understanding of where you are, and coming to situations with an even keel, which is funny because a lot of what Laurie and I have been talking about this month is the importance of communication, and how much, not just the Libra, but the other pieces. If you've listened to our Libra season video, we talked about the fact that Mars is also in Gemini and Saturn's in Aquarius, which brings in air. And the air is all about this kind of unification through ideas. And one of the things that occurs to us is how difficult communication is. And I think anybody listening to this right now, you kind of go, oh yeah, communication is so important, and we all kind of know that, but we don't necessarily really understand how to best communicate. It depends on the relationship you have. There's so many things to it, but there just seems to be such a strong emphasis right now. And so at this new moon, that's what we're going to be talking about quite a bit, I think.
Yeah. And, with it being Libra, and Libra being so much about, what you see in the mirror, a lot of this really will focus on communication with a specific partnership, within a specific partnership. So giving that thought, I've just been reading a book. It's by a woman named Susan Scott, and the name of it is Fierce Love. It's really a wonderful book. She also wrote a book called Fierce Communication, which I also want to read. But she talks about relationship, intimate partnership, as, the partnership is the communication. And, if you really start thinking about that, you realize the importance and how easy it is in our busy lives to just lose touch with anything other than superficial communications with the people that are most important in our lives.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
read that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a really great book.
It really is an
In
excellent
one day,
book.
yeah.
I'm impressed with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, because I think it also, part of what I've been thinking about, because we have all three air signs involved in Libra season, it's multiple levels. It's how you talk to the person at the grocery store. It's how you interact with your neighbor over the fence. It's how you talk to your sibling. It's how you talk to your partner. And then it's the bigger stuff, how you interact socially, like what kind of impact you want to have socially. And can you use your voice to communicate on a social and community level? I mean, I can't think of a time in history when it has been more important than right now to figure out how to communicate with people we don't agree with.
Right.
With just
And that includes listening.
Yes, exactly. So not just pontificating like like I'm representing right now, but
Right.
but to stop and listen and really take in what other people are saying to you and pause and kind of create a
Ask
little space.
questions.
Yeah, yeah, and those are all things that I think, in my opinion, are part of air too. The
Yeah.
pause, the take a breath, the step
Right.
back.
Right.
So
Right. And
yeah,
yeah, a lot she talks about in this book too is just how our communication should be mostly asking questions. There's so much the importance of asking questions and listening.
wow, yeah.
Yeah.
I think everyone needs to read that. I'm going to put it on my list.
Yeah, I'm totally impressed with it. Anyway, let's take a look at the chart itself
Let's
of
do it.
the actual new moon. There
Yeah.
we have
So
it.
here we
Okay.
have, and your eye may be drawn immediately to the fact that there's a little cluster of planets up there, huh?
Yes, there certainly is a little cluster of planets up there. And we've got the new moon right there, the sun and the moon in the same spot. And we've got Venus and Mercury are quite close to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the moon just went over them before it got to the sun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
Mercury is retrograde. So Mercury has
yeah.
backed up over the sun. We have the conjunction between Mercury and the sun. What day did that happen?
The 23rd, we had the inferior
23rd.
conjunction.
Okay.
So just a couple days before this. And it also, that conjunction between the sun and Mercury showed up in what's known as the Aries point, which is a
Right.
very public place. So on that day, you may have noticed some very prominent conversations happening in your own life and also in the much larger public life of everything around you. So think about that. Yeah, but that's interesting because that represents the midpoint of the Mercury retrograde cycle, which is nice. It's still going to go back through Virgo for a little bit before it returns back through Libra.
Right.
But this interesting with this chart. You've got the new moon in Libra, and it's opposing Jupiter.
That
Kind of the
is
most clear.
yeah, that's the clear, very precise almost opposition. So this really, an opposition, it's like a full moon is an opposition. So you can kind of take that in any opposition, there's an illumination, a clarity.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you think about that? It's like this very determined, assertive expansion that is being seen through the eyes of the relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting about this is normally we would be talking about this particular aspect at the full moon, right? I mean, it kind of brings in this full moon idea right from the get-go. And really what it's doing is this entire month is flavored by that, or this entire season by Jupiter and Aries opposing Libra. And it's just it really brings in themes of the autonomy of Aries and where do you need to, as you said, be determined, be fierce, stand up, like assert yourself, be independent, all of those types of themes. And in opposite to how do you cooperate? How do you work with other people? How do you listen? How do you relate? And how do you communicate? So it's kind of bringing in those two themes the whole time. And that there's a huge expansion available through the autonomy of standing on your own 2 feet.
It's so funny, that book, Fierce Love, it is here. You're using fierce for Aries, love for that. It's just kind of funny how these things come together.
Yeah. So this is something about how you kind of, work with yourself or work with your independence in order to then be a solid presence to collaborate, to communicate.
So yeah, really fiercely looking at your own role in what you have created and what you want to create in partnership.
Yeah. And I remember reading a great book a while ago. I think it's called The Entangled Life. And it talks about that the true meaning of collaboration is a mix of cooperation, which is like Libra, and independence, which is like, competition. Excuse me, competition, which is like Aries.
What was the name of that book again?
It's called The Entangled Life.
Okay.
I think it's by Merlin Sheldrake, but it talks about that collaboration, again, is this combination of cooperation, and really working with other people, and this edge of competition that kind of drives everything forwards. And that is a lot of, the book is about, that I'm talking about is about mycelium, mushrooms in the world and how they function. And this is a lot how they function. And this is a beautiful metaphor for the Libra and Aries axis.
Oh, I will, I'll include links to both of those books in the show notes as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So
think about collaboration, and that's and as you are also incorporating the ideas of communication.
Yeah.
So
fascinating.
What the other things I think I would want to mention just briefly here, with Mercury retrograde conjunct Venus that rules the new moon, but both of those things are opposing Neptune. So that brings in, there's not a lot of clarity going on. It's kind of like you have to be okay with some fogginess and not having all the clarity you might want. It's going to be easy to idealize and romanticize and kind of ignore, shall we say, like some red flags that might come up or something that normally you might respond to. So that's just a sort of cautionary tale too, to pay attention at this new moon. There's this tremendous ability to romanticize something.
It's like both are going on at once. There's this clarity that you need to take this fierce action, to do this work. And yet at the same time, part of you just wants to go take a nap, have a glass of wine, watch a movie and ignore all that. So both of those things. So you really have to keep your eyes open on this.
Yeah. And what was we were talking about before? So this is like when you should have that conversation with your partner or your friend that's really frustrating, but really you just want to have a glass of wine with them, right?
Right.
It's kind of that interplay. And it's a very interesting little interplay with the Pisces Virgo, so different from the Aries Libra.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And then Pluto trines them all. Trines everything over there. Just, that's just a statement of empowerment as you move forward. So, I think of that Pluto in a trine aspect there is really the importance of which path you take. Are you going to sit down and watch that movie and drink a glass of wine? Or are you going to have that fierce conversation? Whichever you have is going to be empowered.
Yeah. Yeah. And also just a lot of dynamic energy. Sorry, Laurie, go ahead.
No, that's all. That's it.
Yeah. I was just going to echo that. That's a interesting way to think about it. And also just kind of echo that life is complex. I mean, it's not just an either or situation. There's a little bit of incorporating all of these things. So maybe having the somewhat stark clarity, but being willing to be a bit softer in your presentation to a degree, or, or to bring in recognize the bigger picture of having more empathy for people, for whoever you're working with.
I love that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not what I love about astrology is it's really just like, hey, there's complexity here, and it's not choosing one. It's learning to work with the mix, messy.
That's beautiful. I mean, it is, it's like, okay, there's that clarity that this fierce conversation has to happen. And yet there's also this awareness that you have to be gentle with it.
Yeah. So maybe that's what the Pluto trine means, because
Yeah. Yeah.
it really
Oh, I
trines the
love that.
Venus and the Mercury, and Venus is rules that new moon because it rules Libra, but it kind of brings in this, like, that's what's really being empowered, is allowing the softness and perhaps a little bit more of the, I don't know, I think about earthy qualities, bringing the earthy quality to, like, do something sensual with this,
Right.
you know, like make it a full body experience.
Have your conversation, do it gently with a glass of wine, and then afterwards you can watch your movie.
There you go.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. That's really important. Thank you for articulating it that well. And yeah, it's not either or.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good.
Well,
Okay.
we probably should move on. Though, I mean, I do have to mention one more thing.
Okay.
And that is just something you mentioned in the video, which is just that the Saturn Uranus square is very close in this chart, and we just can't ignore it. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep.
that
There's
just
that. And
yeah.
the North Node is here.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this quite a bit in the Libra season video.
We did.
So go back and listen to that if you're interested in it, because that's the backdrop, that
Yeah.
Saturn square is the backdrop of so much of what's going on, in the bigger culture. You listen to the news, you watch your TV, whatever, you see the battle lines being drawn in the culture. And that's that Saturn Uranus square, still active. It's been with us for a very long time.
Yeah. And it brings in that whatever's going on in your personal life all matters. It's all part of this bigger fabric. And that's kind of what it brings in. But yeah, there's definitely more about that in our other videos. So
yes. Okay.
Shall we move on?
We should.
Okay.
But I'm going to pause for one moment. Okay, so now we're ready to move into the personal impact, and we're going to talk to you about how and where you're going to plant your own personal seed for this new moon. So we're going to start out, those of you with Aries rising, the new moon's falling in your 7th house. So this is very much about you being in relationship with others. The seed that you're planting is going to be about creating more diplomacy, more connection with a partner, with the awareness of really being true to yourself in order to do that. I mean, one of the things with that Libra is you could be kind of wishy-washy around how you want to plant that seed, but in paying attention to yourself and the determination to be really autonomous has to play into the way you plant that seed, the way you envision what you need to grow during this time.
Yeah. I mean, this is just a classic case of being autonomous for yourself and making sure you're standing your ground in the way that you need to, and not giving yourself away into the relationship, but that you're also willing to be open and cooperative and want to work towards more balance and equability in your relationship. I mean, it's sort of a classic, mirroring situation in your relationship. So
and that happens so much. Those of you with Aries rising, life is interesting with Aries there and Libra there. Just the way it's set up is a particular way for you. Okay.
Yeah, because you can come across as really fierce, but be really mild in your relationship. So
right. Yeah. Okay. So for those of you with Taurus rising, we've got the new moon falling in your 6th house. So what's the seed we're going to plant in that 6th house, Jennie?
Well, the sixth house is all about routines, and self-improvement, but it's self-improvement for the name of keeping yourself healthy,
Right.
because the sixth house can also imply injury and illness. So what you really want to do is have some really well balanced routines about how you take care of yourself. And because you have Libra there, it's a great opportunity to bring other people in we're kind of joking about like going to the gym and having the great conversation while you're working out, but it's true, I mean, and if you're struggling with, let's say, your exercise routines, like it's time to create relationships around that.
Right.
Get your friend to meet you. Go on a walk with somebody that you want to have a conversation with. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Right. And the
Yeah.
conversation that you can bring in can be very personal.
Yeah, and like profound. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of depth to that
Yeah.
12th house where the
Yeah.
Jupiter and Aries is. So there's something about, being brave, like using that Aries
Right.
stuff to dig into
Right.
those deeper layers that are
Right.
kind of like your unconscious and maybe some unhealed stuff. And so you really could have some very rich conversations.
At the gym.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, or just at in your moving your body, which is
Yeah.
going to be something very important for anyone with Taurus
Yeah.
rising, moving your
Yeah.
body. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, that's great. So now let's move on to those of you with Gemini rising. Okay, that
Mhm.
left that little mark there. Sorry. Okay, so if you have Gemini rising, this Libra new moon is falling in your fifth house, which is the area of where you give love. It's creativity and where we give love to others. So the seed you're planting is really about, I like how you brought in the idea of bringing others in,
Mhm.
finding, creative project maybe that involves others.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
so you could plant a seed of how, yeah, of a creative project. If you want to
Mhm.
have children, now's time to plant that seed as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And also too, I think with Libra in the fifth house, it's like you have quite a good skill set of making people feel love through your conversation. I mean, because the fifth house is how you give unconditional love.
right.
And you have a very equitable mindset towards treating people equally. Like that is an important value. And it brings in this kind of interesting thing I think about with Jupiter and Aries. Well, this is about how you assert yourself in groups. So it does this interplay between how you show leadership, which is an Aries thing, in front of the groups of people, and being brave enough to do that and to sort of welcome in the love of other people, which is really what that 11th house is, right?
Right, right. Yeah, that polarity between the 5th and the 11th, I really love that. It's so you're planting a seed for how to give love, and at the same time you're really being courageous enough to receive it,
Hmm.
which supports you in planting that seed, right?
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
Um, and the other key thing that I didn't throw in there for the Libra thing is playfulness. I love the idea of playfulness in the fifth house. This
Yeah.
is where you want to have fun with life. This is not about how you earn your money or the serious things you have to
Right.
do. I mean, this is more of that playful, free, love giving space.
Yes.
So that's, make sure you engage that as you plant your
Yeah,
seed.
absolutely. I love that. The fifth house, the old time astrologers talked about it as the house of children, love affairs, and creativity, but it's not the hard, painful work of raising children. It's the fun part of raising children. And yeah, it's not the serious part of relationship. It's that fun, sexy time. So plant a seed for all of that, for how you're going to give love and how you're going to allow yourself to receive it as well.
Lovely.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So let's move on to those of you with Cancer rising. So that's going to put this new moon right there in your fourth house. So you have the opportunity here at this new moon to plant a seed of bringing more relationship, bringing more diplomacy into your family, to your home. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the area to plant the seed.
Yeah, this is bringing that voice of reason, right?
Yeah. If you're having a struggle in your family in some way, now is the time to really sit down, communicate, pay attention, listen, find ways to see both sides of things. And at the same time, you have that awareness of the courage that you bring to your career.
Mhm. Yeah. So this is kind of like, think about diplomacy and cooperation down in your family life. But on the other end of it, where do you need to be autonomous? Where do you need to assert your independence in your career, your profession, how you show up in public, or to the public eye? Because you could be someone staying at home looking after children. You're still going to show up in the public eye as the fierce protector. I mean, it depends what it doesn't matter actually what you're doing. You're still going to work with that. So there's a relationship between how you are able to be in your workplace and then go home and be into this cooperative conversational piece. So they work really well together.
Yeah, and that so planting that seed of harmony and diplomacy in your family, you can also think of it, depending on what your situation is, of bringing more beauty into your home. It could have a lot to do with just creating beauty, but sharing it. Maybe it's time to hire that home decorator. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just thinking of saying that. I was like, oh, it's time for me to work on my house before the season ends. Shoot, bring my work, my home together.
But don't do it don't do it all on your own though.
Yeah.
You've got to get the input of your partner, clearly.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah. Anyone that you consider family that you're living with, anyone in your home space.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay. So, now we're going to move on to those of you with Leo rising. And here we have look at that.
Look at that.
Okay. Here we have the new moon falling in your third house. So the seed you're going to be planting here is somehow very directly about communication. Possibly communication on a level. You can think of that third house as siblings or neighbors or the person at the grocery store. So you can practice in those relationships as well. But it's really, it's being diplomatic with your voice.
Yeah. I was thinking anyone with Leo rising, it's like you have this natural flair for drama. That's part of your personal path. And it also means, because you have Libra in your third house, as you always do, that you're good at like just making people feel seen and included and brought to the table in that neighborly kind of way. People you don't know well, acquaintances, and maybe your siblings too, because it does bring in that designation. But so this is a great opportunity to think about what's going on in your life right now and where can you plant that seed for bringing your natural skill set to that area of life.
Right. And how does Jupiter up there, your fierce worldview, is really showing you, maybe what those conversations are about? How do you think about that, Jennie?
Well, I think part of the reason for your ability with the Leo rising in that third house to talk to people is because you are brave enough to incorporate other people's worldviews. Like you're confident in your own self. So you can open your mind and think critically and think for yourself about the broader worldview and be much more inclusive. So I think that's part of what's funneling. They work so well together. And you just see the bigger picture, or at least you have the potential to, right? Like you've got to assert yourself and be confident to do it. But you have it.
Yeah. So if you've got a communication project of some sort, a writing project, a speaking project that is attached in some way to your worldview, this is the time to plant a seed for that, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So now we're going to move on to those of you with Virgo rising, and this is going to put the new moon itself in your second house. What are we going to plant a seed for here?
Oh, I just right away, my mind goes just finding an even keel regarding how you value yourself. Like,
Mm.
are you attributing enough value to yourself? How are you feeling about your self-worth, like your self-esteem? I start with that, and then take that out a bit further and think about bringing balance to your finances. I mean, but this is only in this few weeks, though I suppose you could be using the year-long
Right.
category. But think about in the short term, what do you need to do to balance your checkbook?
Yeah, yeah, and planting a seed that's going to that's going to really develop into an increase in your self-worth. I think that's really important to think about, and to think about the sociability of Libra. You know, there's some way of bringing more social charm to the table that will support your self-esteem. Maybe you just need to talk to people more. Maybe you've
Yeah,
been stuck behind
yeah.
a screen and you've lost your ability to speak to anybody.
Yes, that could be a thing.
That
Or
could
it
be a
might
thing.
also, you might also just need to think about bringing in a financial planner. You know, if you're working with the more superficial money piece of it, which can cut deep, but the
Right.
money is the superficial representation of your resources and your self-worth.
Right. Yeah. So maybe it's the time to hire an accountant to help you with that.
Yes, right. Might be.
It might be.
Yeah, which kind of, I mean, brings in, I mean, Jupiter and Aries in the 8th house there, that brings in just this real need to stand on your own 2 feet and have some good boundaries around other people's stuff. Because, you know, everybody likes to come at you with their stuff, their own values. And with this, like, you're kind of being asked to grapple with that, but to be very clear about, okay, nope, I've done my work. I'm here. I feel confident. And that just allows you to work with people who are coming at you from totally different places.
Yeah, so it really does. It takes bravery and courage to do that work. So yeah, thinking about that, the bravery it takes to plant that seed. There's something in that as well. Huh. Okay.
Yeah, it's a cool interplay.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Okay, so now we're going to move on to those of you with Libra rising. If I can get this to behave. Here we go. With those of you with Libra rising, this is going to put the new moon right in your first house. This is very personal to you. You're planting a seed to increase your charm, your personality charm, your ability to be diplomatic, to show up in the world as that person that has that ability to see both sides, to be diplomatic.
Yeah, it's also going to be a good time for those of you Libra rising just to check in with the moon there. Are you paying attention to your own emotional needs? You know, are you tuning into that? Because it's very easy with Libra rising to just kind of give yourself away, you know, to kind of give too much of yourself and get lost in that Libra thing we were talking about in the beginning, where you're maybe not quite sure because you're so busy thinking about the other person. So I think that that's something that's important to do. Fortunately, you have Aries in the 7th house. So that means that, well, I'd say in the negative, you got to watch out for being really selfish in your partnership, right? But on the positive, it means knowing when to assert the right amount of autonomy so that you can be liberated in your relationships, in your partnerships. I think that that's an important piece. It's a very tricky balance, right?
Yeah,
Between
that's
autonomy and cooperation.
it's an interesting balance, because I also think people with Libra rising, you know, trying to show up in this diplomatic way, seeing both sides of things, can often really get into relationships with people that are very aggressive and assertive. So yeah, taking that as rather than taking that as your own ability to be brave and courageous in facing relationship and allowing it to support you.
Yeah. I mean, it's really that whole you want to get to interdependence. You don't want
Right.
codependence.
Right.
You don't want complete independence, because that means no partnership.
Right.
So it's this interdependence.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's such an important word to keep in mind, especially around Libra. Yeah, that interdependence is what we all want in relationship. And the culture kind of shifts back and forth from one to the other. I remember, oh God, it must have been in the 70s or 80s when all of a sudden the whole culture seemed to be very concerned with codependency. And so everything went to the reverse way. And it's like there's this middle ground. You don't have to be totally independent. You don't have to be totally dependent. You find that middle ground where you support each other. And that's really key to those of you with Libra rising right now, finding that middle ground.
Yeah. Well said.
Okay, so let's move on to those of you who have Scorpio rising. And this brings the new moon into the 12th house. What seed are we planting here, Jennie?
Well, I think this brings an interesting little irony because, well, Scorpio rising that's a pretty intense purpose suggested by that sort of a path of intensification and deep investigation. And then here you have this like very mind-oriented Libra in the 12th house. And the 12th house is kind of our hidden desires and our unconscious behaviors and, the place where we kind of have to confront isolation. And work with it. So it's a little bit like you've got to go in and take some time alone in order to understand how you want to relate. There's a funny interplay between those two things here. But I also think it means that you might be able to get a little more space than other people from these kind of challenging issues. You are Scorpio rising after all, but you get with that Libra there, you can take a little step back and evaluate and assess before you move forwards. So that's what it makes me think of.
Well, what I was thinking also of the, planting a seed to more deeply understand your unconscious. And with it being in Libra, I was thinking, it's a great time to make an appointment with a new therapist that's going to support you on that journey with Libra being there, because you really can, I think with Libra there, it's a place where you can open up some trust with another. I don't think it's easy. The 12th house is not an easy house.
No.
But a way in there, I think, is with another.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because, you really want to understand, like, it's kind of seeing the way that you interfere with your own process by mirroring it in another, so like if you go see the therapist, you may start to understand how you actually unconsciously sabotage some things, because we all do that. But the 12th house indicates hidden enemies, one of them being yourself, of being unaware.
Right. Yeah, that's a great I love the way you said that. Hidden enemies, one of being yourself. I've never thought about that. But that's really important, since we all are our worst enemy.
Totally. I'm thinking probably can relate.
Yeah. So with that opposition to Jupiter, part of the process of planting that seed is really being courageous enough, taking on the determination to work with your body. Some day-to-day routines are going to really support you, day-to-day assertive routines.
I always think this is the great place for or placement, I should say, for solo sports, those high risk sports, like mountain biking or base jumping or something, this is really extreme.
This is not,
I'm doing this.
This is not quiet yoga.
I mean, if you're going to do yoga, this is going to be like the really intense, like power yoga, where you're going to sweat and you might grunt in yoga. And there's a little bit more of that. But it's really important with Scorpio rising too, that you are really using that physical principle to keep yourself healthy. You need to sweat. You sweat lodge. maybe something important for you. Go to the Nordic
Absolutely.
spa.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think we've covered that one. Now let's move on to those of you with Sagittarius rising. This is bringing that new moon into the 11th house, which is where we receive from others, from the community. So we're going to somehow here at this new moon, you're going to want to plant a seed for the growth of a diplomatic community, or how do you think of that?
Well, I totally along the lines of what you're saying, but just kind of like that. Just let your community love you because you're really good at being diplomatic. You're really good at
Oh,
bringing
nice.
beauty and diplomacy into the group space. So just do it. Let it happen. Let people receive a compliment for it. You know, you're good at it.
Yeah,
So,
and if
yep.
you're in a situation where you don't have the community you want right now, this is a time to plant a seed, to
Yeah.
develop that community, find that community, really push that piece forward right now.
Yeah.
And with that opposition from Jupiter, your own creativity will support that.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah, so this is the time to recognize your diplomacy and grooves and then allow that to kind of fuel your willingness to just take that risk and get deeply involved in your creative pursuits and allow that to be sort of the gift you're giving the world, the where you get to just dig in and just be you and do you for something that you love to do. And it's going to help you blossom in the area of life that's represented by Libra. So,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. With Libra there, you can, really meet important people in your life through community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's
So,
a something to think about as well.
yeah. So you may be bringing up some with this setup. You may have the opportunity to bring up some challenging issues to your community, or bring something to light that is a cause that needs to be fought for. Those sorts of things that really ties that nicely together.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Very good. Okay. So now let's move on to those of you with Capricorn rising. This brings the new moon itself into your 10th house. So you're planting a seed around your career or your reputation, bringing more of a inclusive perspective into your career.
yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think that sounds good. I mean, I think this is also the focus of somebody who's good at getting cooperation in the workplace. You might have a bit of a reputation for knowing how to speak evenly and clearly to authority figures, and bring about more collaboration in your office space or whatever your work is.
Right.
It's very likely that that's the case.
So, you could plant a seed in real practical ways. You might want to update your resume. You might want to bring some artwork into your office space and make it more beautiful. Those are, little things that you can do to really kind of set the stage for creating more of a career that really fits your needs.
Yeah, and really brings in the collaboration. I think
Yeah.
if you're in a workplace where it's not collaborative enough, it's definitely time to seek it because you have the ability. So, yeah. And then you got to stand up for yourself in your home life, right? You got to have autonomy and find your own ground in your home life, whatever that is, your family life.
Yeah. You're trying to create this beauty and diplomacy and balance in your career, but at home, you've got to bring a lot more courage and determination.
Yeah, and this can be your physical home, which we also talk about. Like maybe maybe you've got to make that call because of some repairs that are needed. But this also can be something much more esoteric, like your lineage, and having to kind of tease through some old baggage and stand your ground and sort of go, nope, I'm not taking that on, or something else more along those lines. It depends what else is going on in your chart, to be honest.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, it could have a lot to do with members of your family.
yeah.
Interesting.
So,
Okay, so plant that seed, bring your artwork to work. Okay, let's see. Now we're going to move to those of you with Aquarius rising, and this is going to place your new moon in the 9th house, which is the area of our world view. So this could really be a statement of it's time to listen, pay attention to other people's worldview, to really come to a balanced understanding of of your bigger picture ideas. And when I say worldview, that can include all kinds of things. It can include politics or religion, not spirituality, but if you're involved with a religious organization, there could be something there, or education, travel. So there's something there. It would be a good time to begin a new way of seeing the world.
Yeah, and I also think people with Aquarius rising too, they're just part of your life direction is going to be about this ability to be inventive or be innovative or to be futuristic thinking, where you can, it's that whole 7th generation concept, right? Where you're not just thinking about like this generation, you're thinking about 7 more generations beyond. And Aquarius kind of holds that sort of wisdom with it. And then when you have the Libra as well, in the 9th house, it just adds to that ability for this person to be very broad-minded and really to take in other people's viewpoints, as you already said.
Right.
But it really just sets it up for that you are uniquely positioned to really have a really good critical thinking skills, and to think beyond just whatever community you're familiar with and about, but really to think about globally, and just people who are very different, and also animals, other beings besides us humans. So
so planting a seed in that house could look like many things. It could look like going and signing up for a class to educate yourself in some way. It could be going and volunteering to work the polls for the upcoming election. It could be going to help some migrant center, some cultural center. And how does Jupiter in opposition from the 3rd house support that, Jenny?
I just always think it's like, okay, so you're just going to have to be brave, and you're going to have to say it. You're going to have to speak your mind, and you're going to have to bring this much broader, wiser set of information down into the commonplace, down into the ordinary, to your neighbors, to the person at the store, the thing we talk a lot about. And I just always think that you have a lot to say, and you have a really important impact to have on society. And this is largely about you stepping on your own 2 feet, being autonomous, or standing on your own feet and feeling strong and brave and just doing it, despite any reservations you have about it not being nice or not being cooperative enough. So I really like that about this one.
Wherever Aries is a place that we really have to develop courage and be brave. And with Jupiter in there, it's like that area is so heightened. Okay, so now we're going to move on to those of you with Pisces rising. Last but not least, here, if you've got Pisces rising, this new moon is falling in your 8th house. So what is the seed that we are planting here?
This is the seed for employing your diplomacy skills to setting really good boundaries with other people. You really have the ability to have some space when other people kind of come into the room with all of their different values, and and you've got to figure out how to share resources with them, and yet they might have a diametrically different viewpoint than you. So this is that ability to do that. So we're planting a seed for that sort of diplomacy with setting your boundaries.
And this, that's great. It really is about setting boundaries of how to navigate that space that can be so difficult of other people's values and baggage and all of that.
And it's directly related to your ability with that Jupiter and Aries there to broaden your self-love, essentially, to recognize your own self-worth and to be fierce about it, to be,
Right.
nope, this is who I am and I respect myself.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be able to bring diplomacy to other people, their difficult issues.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, right?
Yeah, that polarity between the second and the eighth house is so interesting. It's like my values, other people's values,
Yeah.
and really, really needing to hold your own values strong in order to be diplomatic and open and understanding others. Huh.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, what you're planting a seed for, what you're planting a seed of is the ability to set the boundaries,
Mm. Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so do your work, and I think that ends our. Okay, we went through them all. I hope you've learned something, and if anybody's still with us, thank you for watching.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank
All
you,
right,
Laurie.
bye bye.
Okay, bye.